Anybody tired yet? Just got to breathe after watching that, right? It's like out of control. You're like, I'm not ready. It's not Monday yet. Can't wait. Well, hey, welcome to church. I'm so glad that you are here. If you're new, you're hanging out for the first time, man, we love it that you are here. My name's Jack, and I get to be one of the pastors here, and we're thrilled that you chose to spend time with us this week. And if you don't know a whole lot about our church, just know we're just a church that's learning what it means to love God and to love others. We want to do that really well, and we're glad that you're on this journey with us. We think it doesn't matter if you know a ton about Jesus or you know very little about Jesus. What matters is that you're here, and we think that you belong here. And so we're just thrilled that you chose to spend time with us. I want to say hi to those tuning in online too. If you're watching on our live feed, if you're watching on Facebook Live, wherever you are today, we're glad that you're tuning in, and we pray that this is a blessing to you as well. Today, I'm just going to dive right in because I'm really excited about what I want to talk about today, what I feel like God's put on my heart to kind of share with us as a church, because we're kicking off this brand new series this weekend called Make Room. And we're going to take a look at over the next few weeks, what does it actually look like to simply quiet some of the noise, clear some of the clutter, and actually prepare for greater. If God has more in store for us, if God has greater things for us, and we're in constant pursuit of those greater things, then what does it look like to position ourselves, to place ourselves in the right environments for God to be able to bless us, for God to be able to do a great work in and through our life? We think that it requires creating some room, creating some space. Whether it's a new year or not, here's what we know about us. Everybody wants to be better. Everybody wants to be better than where they are right now. We wonder how we're going to get slimmer, stronger, smarter, faster, get out of debt. We wonder how we're going to become this better person or better people. And the reality is that we all kind of start this new year with this mental clean slate. Isn't that true of us? Like we say, okay, this is my year. Okay, this is how I'm going to do it. Okay, this is how it's going to go. And mentally we start thinking like, all right, I'm just going to start over. Here I go. But did you ever think that there's a difference between what's in your head and what's in your heart? That there's a big disconnect sometimes between what's in our head and what's in our heart. We have a mental clean slate of this is going to be something different for me, it's something new for me, but yet I come into a new year with baggage in my heart, with junk in my life, with things that I didn't let go of last year, haven't let God heal, whatever those things are. I come in carrying those things in this new year, and what happens is I get into a few weeks of January, and then suddenly I find myself back in the same rut, the same routine, the same habits over and over again. How do we break out of that? How do we move forward from that? How do we actually experience our best year? We said last week that this could be your best year personally, as long as you choose to make it your best year spiritually. And what you have to do is making it your best year spiritually is not about you doing a bunch more things. It's simply assessing your life. That's a key word, assessing your life and getting rid of some things, maybe even some really good things that are just keeping you from the best things. I want to say that again because sometimes you're like, how does that work? You said good thing? Yeah, sometimes there's good things in our life that keep us from the best things in our life. There's really bad things that keep us from good things, right? But there's good things that could be potentially keeping us from bad things. How do you make room for God to work in and through your life and knowing that you and I, we're created for more? But it's not more stuff, and it's not more activity. It's more impact in the world around us. That our lives go beyond just us. Our lives extend far beyond what we're living right now. God has a greater purpose for us, and he's inviting us collectively as a church, but also individually as people to simply make some room. But you know what's crazy about this idea of make room? You and I both know, as much as we don't like to look at it this way, and it feels uncomfortable when people tell us this, you and I both know that we will always make the time and create the space for what matters most to us. And most of you don't like to hear that because it's usually when somebody's calling you on the carpet about something. Right? You didn't do something, or you said you were going to do something and it didn't happen, and that person is looking at you. We're like, well, don't tell me you meant to do it, because you know what? You'll do the things that are most important to you. Right? We've all been there. But we know deep down inside that's true of us. We tend to make time. You can see it in the things that we invest in. You can see it in our spending habits. You can see it where we devote the majority of our time. The reality is you and I tend to make room, create the space for the things that matter most to us in our life. But the problem with that is you and I create the space and have the tendency to make room for the things that we want, the things that we need, the things that we desire, the things that we think are the best, the things that we think are the absolute most important. But here's what I want to suggest to you. How often have you stopped and paused and said, God, what do you want from me? And what is your best for my life? And God, what do you require of me? In other words, here's a big question. If you're going to, kind of ask yourself, you got to start by assessing where we are in our relationship with God. This is not on your notes. This is just some extra, you know what I'm saying? It's a new year. I'll give you some extra. But can you just write down one of these words? If you were to look at your relationship with God and where you are with God right now, what could you honestly say? Do you feel distant from God? Maybe God feels far from you, or you feel far from God. You're kind of here, but you kind of see God as somewhere out there, that God's not really paying attention to you. He doesn't really care about you. What does that look like? What about this? Maybe some of you just kind of feel decent in your relationship with God, right? It's just kind of decent. It's comfortable. It's not great. We know it could be better, but it's not bad. It's not terrible. It's just neither here nor there. It's just there, right? It's just kind of what is. And then some of us, here's where we are. We're devoted, right? We want to be devoted, meaning we have this desperate desire. We have a hunger. We want more of God. We want more of God. We want more of what God has for us. And here's what I got to say. No matter where you are on this kind of like journey, on this path, no matter what you feel your relationship with God looks like right now, here's what you got to know. God does have something more. We said last week he wants to do something new in and through you. He wants you to know him. He wants you to be close to him. He wants you to grow and thrive, not just have a comfortable existence, but living life to the fullest. And he wants to meet that need for that hunger for more. Those that hunger and thirst after righteousness, they will be filled to overflow. It will be so fulfilling. They'll realize that, hey, I have everything I need in Jesus because I realize that Jesus changes everything. That Jesus, he makes a difference. But I got to assess, like, where am I right now? And then I got to take the next step, okay? Once I assess things in my life, again, assessment is going to be great for our time together, not just today, but the next few weeks as we talk about this idea of this introspective look at where we're at, assessing where we are with God, but then also assessing this big statement. And I hope you know this. There's a big difference between wanting and being willing. There's a big difference between wanting and being willing. And I pray that you're taking notes today. I pray that you're soaking in some of this stuff. I pray that you'll take pictures of the screen if you have to. I see some of you do that sometimes, whatever it is. But I think this is going to be important for us, especially if 2019 is going to be our best year personally, then it has to be our best year spiritually. As a church, we're taking personal responsibility to help you grow spiritually. We think we can help with that, and you should be excited about that, but it only works if you understand there's a big difference between wanting and being willing. Here's the deal. Many of us, we want God to work in our lives. We want more of God in our lives. We want the blessings of God in our lives. We want to see God do amazing things in our life. We want, but here's the key question. Are we willing, though, to allow God to move? Are we willing to allow God to work? Are we willing to allow God to, get this, remove some things out of the way that are hindering us from going deeper with him, from taking a next step with him, from actually being all that he has intended us to be? Are we willing to allow God to take full control, or are we just going to continue to figure it out on our own? In the book of Luke, the gospel according to Luke, Luke is fascinating because he documents the life and the teachings and the activity of Jesus. Today, we're going to look at a passage of scripture that kind of sets up our time together today that'll help us take this introspective look. Okay, and so if you're following along your notes, it's also going to be on the screens. I hope you'll kind of soak in this moment. Jesus has just gotten done kind of sharing this story about the Good Samaritan, right? He's been talking, some of you know that story, like the unlikely person actually helps the marginalized, the poor. Everybody else looks past them and goes beyond. I don't have time for that. But then the unlikely person actually comes along and helps with that. And Jesus is now moving on because Jesus is always progressing. He's always on to the next thing. He's always knowing where he's going. And it suddenly says this in Luke. Luke documents, as Jesus and his disciples continued on their way to Jerusalem, they came to a certain village where a woman named Martha welcomed him into her home. We're going to talk about this story of two women that are sisters named Mary and Martha. Some of you, again, you may be familiar with this story. You may have heard bits and pieces of this story, but I want you to ask God to help you see it with a different perspective today, to maybe open up your eyes to some things that maybe you've not really grasped out of this story. Jesus is going to Jerusalem. They came to a village. You have a woman named Martha. She opens up her home to Jesus. Luke continues. Her sister Mary, though, she sat at the Lord's feet listening to what he taught. So here comes Jesus, his disciples, the whole crew, they're all showing up, they're hanging out at Martha's house, right? And her sister Mary, she sees what's going on. Jesus is in the other room. He's apparently just hanging out with the guys. And what does she do? She chooses to go hang out. She's sitting at the feet of Jesus, listening to what he taught. But Martha, okay, it's contrast, right? Here's Mary, but Martha was distracted by the big dinner she was preparing. Here's two women with the same opportunity, and we're going to discover they had two radically different responses. You have Mary, who recognizes Jesus is in the building. Jesus is in the room. I'm going to stop what I'm doing. I'm going to sit at his feet. I'm going to listen into what he's teaching. But Martha, well, she's distracted, right? I've got dinner guests. Everything has to be right. Oh my gosh, I got to get out the right plates. I got to get out the right china. I got to get the good olive oil, not that weird stuff that you spray out of the can. I get the stuff that drips out. It's actually got the olive still in it. I got to get the goods. I got to get the good hummus, right? You know what I mean? Because Jesus is here. You know what I mean? Like, we can't eat that old nasty hummus. So she's distracted by the dinner that she's preparing. Luke goes on and gives us more detail. She came to Jesus and said, now get this, what we're going to learn. Martha's a little frustrated at this point. She's a little bummed about what's happening, right? She can't believe that her sister is acting this way. So instead of coming and talking to her sister and saying, hey, excuse me, Mary, I need your help. Mary, need it in the kitchen. Mary needed in the kitchen. Like, instead of just like walking up to her and say, hey, can you come with me for a moment? You know what she does? She comes out and she goes straight to Jesus and she says this, Jesus, Lord, doesn't it seem unfair to you that my sister, she's just sitting here while I do all the work? Jesus, doesn't it seem unfair that I'm over here hustling, I'm over here working hard, I'm over here putting this great meal together, I've got everything we need, and then suddenly, here's my sister, she's just sitting on her, not doing anything, right? She's just kind of there. So I do, here's what I need you to do, Jesus. Would you tell her to help me? Talk about putting somebody on blast, right? Talk about Front Street, right? Talk about hey, I don't like what you're doing, and I'm not going to talk to you. I'm going to go talk to somebody else about it. Right? She goes straight to Jesus. She's like, my sister's just sitting here. I'm doing all the work. Tell her to help me. Jesus has an interesting response that I want us to sit in for a moment. But the Lord said to her, my dear Martha. Another translation says, Martha, Martha. Right? Martha, 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 Martha. Right? Like Martha. But the Lord said, my dear Martha, Martha, Martha. In other words, there's a genuine concern. It's not like, Martha, he's not necessarily condemning her in this moment. He's got some concern. But the Lord says to her, my dear Martha, you're worried and upset over all these details. You're so consumed about everything that's going on. You're so overwhelmed by everything that's happening around you. You're so distracted by all these dinner preparations and all these details, trying to make sure everything's right, trying to control and manipulate the situation to be perfect, and you're doing all the work, and you're frustrated that nobody's helping you, and you're distracted and worried and upset by all these details. But he goes on, he says, here's what you got to know. There's only one thing. Remember last week we talked about this one thing? There's only one thing worth being concerned about. And I'm going to tell you what that is, right? Because you need to see it. There's an illustration that's happening right in front of you. There's only one thing worth being concerned about. And Mary, you're frustrated at Mary. You're mad at Mary. You want Mary to help you. But Mary, guess what? She's discovered it. Mary's got it figured out. Mary has made room, right? Like Mary sees that I am here, that I am among her. And because I am here, she's carved out time. She's discovered it. And here's what you got to know. It's not going to be taken from her. Mary wants to connect with me. Mary wants to spend time with me. Mary wants to learn from me. She's not distracted by the details. She's not overwhelmed and upset. She's not frustrated by everything that's going on around the situation. No, she pushes pause. And who knows? Maybe Mary was helping her at one time, right? Some scholars believe that Mary was probably helping Martha in the kitchen at one time, because I don't know if you know anything about first century culture, right? I know as crazy as it is. Back in first century culture, women were relegated to the kitchen, right? That's where they hung out. They were preparing the meals. All the men would go into another room, and men and women, you wouldn't mix. You wouldn't have a woman sitting at the feet of any man, let alone the feet of Jesus. But Jesus comes and he displays something different. Mary displays a desire for more of Jesus, and Jesus says, come one, come all. I am for everybody. It's not about your race, your background. It's not about your gender. The reality is I come to love you. I come to connect with you, to be with you. And Mary, she pauses what she's doing. Maybe she had laundry to do. I don't know. Maybe she had more food to make. But you know what she did? She didn't want to miss the moment. She didn't want to miss out on the opportunity to be with Jesus. And I think that's something huge for us to understand, because Jesus says when you don't miss the moment and you choose to be with me, guess what? There's nothing that can take that from you. It doesn't matter how bad the situation is. It doesn't matter how hard the enemy's trying to attack. It doesn't matter what comes up against you. The reality is that cannot be taken away from you. There's just one thing. There's one thing worth being concerned about. And Mary's figured it out. Another translation says there's just one thing to be concerned about, and Mary has chosen the better way. The better way. If you were to break that down in the Greek, this idea of this better way, it actually says that Mary has chosen the better course. In other words, Mary has chosen the better meal. You're worried about preparing your meal. In other words, you're worried about your side dishes. You know what Mary's done? She's focused in on the main dish. She's focused, and she's not going to let that go. She's going to lean all the way into it. I wonder how many times that many of us, we get so distracted by what's going on in our life that you and I, we end up majoring in the minors. We end up majoring in the minor things that are the little things that aren't the greatest things, but they keep us hindered from the better thing. That sometimes God is pointing us to this better thing, but we're so caught up in what we think we have to do, what we think we need to get done, that we want Jesus to justify it. Jesus, I'm right. Like, I'm doing right things. Like, this is all good stuff. I'm doing the stuff you want me to, right, Jesus? Sometimes Jesus just says, hey, I just want you to forget about all that right now. I just want you to be with me. I want you to make room for me. See, Martha was having a hard time making room, and I think there's a lot going on in this story that goes beyond just surface level. It was more than just distractions. I think there's some underlying currents that we can see that maybe pop up in our life. And fellas, you're here today. Guys, you're here today. I'm speaking to you guys too. Just because this is a story about two women, I'm going to try to help you get in touch with your feminine side today. Okay? Because the same actions that Martha and Mary display are the same actions that you as a guy display sometime, believe it or not. We all display them, believe it or not. It's this underlying current. But the first thing you have to recognize is Martha, guess what? Martha wasn't doing anything wrong. Martha wasn't falling to temptation. Martha wasn't sinning. Martha was doing what you might even consider some really good things. Martha had opened up her home. Martha was showing extreme hospitality. Martha provided this room for people to eat and to hang out and to have a good time. All those were good things, but they were just hindering from the best things. Jesus was in her presence and she was missing it. It's amazing to me about how often you and I, we can invite Jesus into our stuff, but totally miss Jesus working in our stuff. We can invite Jesus close enough to be so close. He's in our home. We say in church all the time, we've invited him into our heart. I mean, it doesn't get more connected and personal than that, right? We've invited him in our heart, but even though we invite him in our heart, sometimes my fear is sometimes we completely miss out on what he's doing. We're so distracted and so overwhelmed and so bothered by other details that might not necessarily be bad things, but they just keep us from the better things. What are those better things? What are the things that are blocking? See, if we're going to actually kind of talk about this, we have to assess ourselves. We have to assess this story. We have to recognize what's in the way if we're actually going to make room for God to work in our life. I want to talk about 4 quick things. I'm not going to spend a ton of time on them because I think as I start talking about them, things will start to click. And here's my hope. You'll start to wrestle with this and you'll start to think. Like God wants you to use your mind. Like we're supposed to reason through some of this. We're supposed to understand what God is calling us to. We're recognizing what's in the way. And I think the first thing that pops out in this story often is the hindrance of hurry. The hindrance of hurry. Martha was distracted by the work. She's in a hurry to get dinner ready. Hurry, Jesus is coming. Hurry, Jesus is here. Oh man, he brought people with him. There's like 12 of them, at least. And they're hanging out like what do I do? I got to make more food. I got to get this done. I got to get that done. I got to get, right? You know, Richard Foster, he says it this way. He says, in our contemporary society, he's talking about our culture, not just first century culture. In our contemporary society, our adversary, or the enemy, the devil. He majors in three things: in noise, in hurry, and in crowds. If he can keep us engaged in the muchness and the manyness, he'll rest satisfied. You know why? Because we're easily distracted. We're easily taken aback by all these things. We're easily consumed by the hurry. Another way you can say that is if the enemy can't push you to do really bad things, then he'll try to get you to become really, really busy. If he can't tempt you to do some really bad things, then he's going to try to get you to become really, really busy. Because here's the deal. He knows that you and I, we have this extreme need to be needed. And when we're busy, it actually kind of makes us feel good. It feels like people need our help. People want us involved. I mean, we're just so busy. I mean, it's so busy that it's crazy. I mean, it's crazy how busy that we are. What if you stopped being busy? How would you feel about yourself? Because some of you, you can't rest more than 10 minutes before you feel the need to get back to being busy. But here's what I want to say. I think there's a big difference between busy and hurry. Here's what you got to know about busy. You and I, guess what? Congratulations, we're all busy. I'm tired of hearing the excuses of, I'm busy, I've been so busy, I'm busy. Welcome to the world. We are busy. All of us are busy. We're always busy doing a lot of different things, but there's a difference between busy and hurry. See, busy is an outward condition of the body, but hurry is this inward condition of our soul. Hurry is about our heart condition. Hurry is about what's going on inside of us, that we become so consumed with ourselves and our life that I'm unable to be fully present with God. That I'm such in a hurry to do all the things that I feel like I need to do and that I have to accomplish and that needs to get done in my life, that really what happens is my soul, my heart becomes fatigued. And when my soul, when my heart becomes fatigued, it often causes me to feel separated from God, separated from community, and even, let's be honest, not quite ourselves. We can't quite put our finger on it, but we know there's something just not right. Could it be the fact that we've been so hindered by the hurry in our life? Maybe it's not hurry, maybe it's this. Maybe it's the obstruction of attitude. The obstruction of attitude. I love this because nobody likes to talk about attitude. Because you and I both know that we're responsible for our attitude. That nobody can pick it and choose it for you. God can help change it, but you got to be open to making room for him to change the attitude in your life. That many of us just become so obstructed by our attitude. Verse 40 says, Lord, this is Martha, don't you care? Don't you care that my sister, she's just sitting there doing nothing? She's sitting there being all lazy. She's sitting there just listening and just hanging out like, oh, this is good. This is awesome. Like, I love you, Jesus. You know, it's like, I love what you're saying. Talk more, Jesus. You know, like, I don't want to go back to the kitchen, right? Martha says, hey, look, like, don't, just tell her to help me. Tell her to get up and to help me. You know what Martha is implying? Martha's implying that in my busyness, in my work, in all these details that I'm so concerned about, one, I'm right to be concerned about those things. And two, you know what? Jesus, I'm not sure that you care about what's important to me. Jesus, I'm not sure you care about what's going on in my life. Jesus, I need you to take notice of me. It looks like Mary has your attention. I mean, she's sitting there all content, all happy, just hanging out with you. But Jesus, I need you to come see about me. Why? Because Martha's absolutely convinced that what she was doing was correct, that her important thing was the greatest thing. When Jesus is trying to show her, no, you're missing it. But just because it's important to you doesn't mean that it's the best thing. And it's that thing that could be keeping you from the greatest thing. But we said, but Jesus, but take my side. Just for once, Jesus, take my side. Right? And we easily fall into I don't know if you've ever done this. We talk about this a lot, but we fall into the trap of comparison. You know, Martha says, look at me, I'm doing all the work all by myself, and she's just doing nothing. How come she's getting blessed and I'm not? Ever thought about that? God, I'm doing everything you want me to do. I came to church, I prayed, I showed up, I went to community group, I did all these things, and God, I still haven't got what I wanted. I still haven't got what I feel like I needed, but yet this dude doesn't even show up once. And he's like, I mean, he's living the life. You know, she didn't even do X, Y, and Z, but you know what? She got what she prayed for. God, I don't know. And in that moment, we begin to compare ourselves. In comparison, we always say there is no win in comparison because comparison was only going to lead you to more anxiety, more stress, and more discontentment with what God is doing in your life. In fact, I would go as far as to say I think one of the greatest challenges of me preaching this message over the next few weeks is going to be the obstruction of attitude. Because some of the things that I'm going to talk about, I'm going to be real. I think they're going to challenge you. they're gonna force you to look inside and see about making some room. And I'm not advocating for minor changes. Yes, I'm talking about extreme focus. Yes, I'm talking about leaning in, but I'm not advocating for minor changes, because let's just be real for a second. If minor changes would work, we would have done that a long time ago. Right? I'm asking for better decisions. I'm asking for God-sized decisions. I'm asking for God to come in and do some excavation, to dig up some things that have been rooted in our life for way too long, that cannot stay any longer if we're going to be able to experience the fullness of God and all he has for us. It's our attitude sometimes that has to change. You're going to say, oh, this is nice. I should consider it. You're right. Sounds good in theory. Just don't know what I'm going to do with it. Right? Think about that. Could that be an obstruction of attitude that is blocking you from God's best for you? What about this? The waste of worry. What about the waste of worry? Scriptures say, what can be added to your life through worry? Anybody have the answer? Nothing. See, some of us, we know that. Does that stop us from worrying? Not always. The waste of worry, this idea of worry, Jesus was able to see not just the surface level of the stuff that's going on. He was able to see through to the core of what was going on and diagnose the problem. She was so worried about the details that she had no peace in her heart. Many of us are worried about all the details that we have absolutely no peace in our heart. And I want to suggest to you that worry is not the result of your problems. Worry is always the result of you trying to control your problems. Worry is always a result of you trying to handle it yourself. But the longer you try to handle it yourself, the longer worry will strangle the life right out of you. In fact, that's actually what the word means. It comes from the German word würgen, which means to choke or to strangle. Let me ask you this. How much time are you wasting worrying? If you assess that in your life, maybe it's worry right there. I feel like Jesus is looking at Martha saying, Martha, stop the worry. Just make some room. Martha, hey, don't worry. None of us are going to starve. Hey, Martha, just relax. Don't worry. None of us are going to miss out on anything. Hey, Martha, just relax. Don't worry. We have plenty of time together. In fact, I'm in control of the time, right? We've got plenty of time. Don't forget who I am in the middle of everything that you are experiencing in your life. So it's not worry for you. I get it. But I think we all have dealt with this. The fortress of frustration. We see this pop up in this story, right? This fortress of frustration. Verse 41, but the Lord said to her, dear Martha, you're worried and you're upset. You're worried and you're upset over all these details. Isn't that true of you and I when things don't go our way? When the details aren't working out like we had hoped, we get a little upset. We get a little frustrated. And sometimes that little bit of upset and that little bit of frustrated, if left unkept, if we don't allow God to remove that out of our life, to heal us of those things, then isn't it true that upset and that frustration kind of seems to turn into a bit of anger? And anger, when anger begins to rise up in our life, anger doesn't just hang out. Anger grows and develops. And when anger grows and develops, guess what it quickly turns into? It turns into resentment. And resentment doesn't stop there. Resentment, it only gets worse from there. Resentment begins to grow and spread like rapid fire through our whole entire existence. We can't celebrate. We just choose to hate. We can't congratulate. We just choose to ignore. There's all these things that are going on in our life because of resentment, and that resentment quickly turns into bitterness. And when bitterness takes root in our heart grows cold. We push everything and anybody out, and suddenly we also push God out. We can't allow God to work in our life because we've made no room. Bitterness has completely consumed our life. When Jesus says, hey, there's one thing worth being concerned about. There's just one thing that you got to focus on here. You got to focus in on the priority. Mary, she's discovered it. To which I'm thinking, Mary, did you hear Martha? She's putting you on blast in front of Jesus. Like say something, Mary. Like say something. Aren't you going to speak for yourself? Aren't you going to be like, hold up, Mary. You know what? I cut all those carrots, right? Who do you think made the pita bread? You know what I'm saying? That was me, Jesus. Usually we want to stick up for ourselves, right? But you know what I love about Mary? Mary chooses silence because she recognizes that in the presence of Jesus, she has no need to defend herself. In the presence of Jesus, she has no need to defend herself. Jesus knows. He knows what's up. He knows what's happening. He sees it all. She says, Jesus, you know my heart. You know where I'm at. It doesn't matter what people say about me. It doesn't matter what they think about. It doesn't matter what my own sister trying to cause drama up in here, trying to come to you instead of talking to me. The reality is, Jesus, you know. And Jesus, I'm here. I'm leaning into you. There's only one thing worth being concerned about, and Mary has discovered it, and it will not be taken away from her. I love it that another translation says, you know what, Mary, you know what she's done? She's made this better choice. She's made this better choice. She's made the better choice. What you have to understand, what I have to understand as we pursue growing spiritually this year, if 2019 is going to be the greatest year, right, it's because we're growing spiritually. And what we have to know about growing spiritually, that is always a choice. You're always presented with a choice. You have to be willing to choose the better choice. And when we're making those choices, the questions we constantly have to ask ourselves is, what do we need to let go of to make room for God to work in our lives? How do we do that? Paul talks to us about that. He talked to the church at Corinth about that. They were struggling with some of these things. They were trying to keep God separate. They're like, hey, I'll do God on Sunday, right? I'll do God, at the temple, you know what I mean? I'll do God sometimes, but then I'll go live my life however I want the other times. You know what I mean? Like I'll be church Jack on Sunday, but I'll be work Jack on Monday. You know what I'm saying? I'll love you, Jesus, all the way down the 405, but when I walk in, I'm going to hate this job. Right? We're like that sometimes. They're trying to separate things. Paul says you can't separate it. Your spiritual life is connected to all of your life. And so if that's true, and you have to constantly be asking yourself what needs to be removed, Paul says you do it this way. You examine yourselves to see if your faith is genuine. Huh? Yeah, you take a good hard look at yourself. No one can do this for you. You got to do this. You come before God. God, examine my heart. Examine my mind. Examine my motives. God, examine me. See, all of us can come in here and fake it. Just because you come to church doesn't mean that you're growing in your faith. Just because you come to church doesn't mean really that God is active and at work in your life. You might have invited God in, but you're missing the moment. You're missing what God wants to do in and through you right here, right now. He says, check yourself. Test it. Do a diagnostic. See if your faith is genuine. Go ahead. Test yourself. He says, surely you got to know this, though, that Jesus Christ is among you. Jesus Christ is among you in your marriage. Jesus Christ is among you in your parenting. Jesus Christ is among you on your job. He's among you in your neighborhood. He's among you at the grocery store. He's among you at Walmart. Praise Jesus, right? Like he's among you right there. He goes with you wherever you go. He's available wherever you are. He's among you. But if you test yourself and you discover that that's not true of you, there's this disconnect. You're examining yourself and you're realizing like, uh-oh, something's not right. I don't feel like Jesus is with me wherever I go. Then maybe you failed the test of genuine faith. Then maybe you've relegated Jesus to church and to Sunday. And Jesus says, would you make room for me to be a part of your everything, your everyday, your all the time, your anywhere, right? That's the test of genuine faith. It's not just sometimes when things are going right. It's not just when I get the things that I want or the things that I think I need. No, it's every time, even when Jesus is doing the hard work of ripping things out of my life that no longer need to be there. And me choosing to let them go. In other words, you can say it like this: God, if there is something in me or about me that's limiting, would you reveal it? God, if there's something in me or about me that is limiting me, would you reveal that to me? God, would you do a work in my heart and reveal that to me? Why? Because I want to grow spiritually. I don't want these things to be a hindrance. I don't want to stay surface level. I want to go down beneath. I want you to do the work that only you can do, because God, it's hard for me, but it's not impossible for you. God, it's difficult for me, but it's not too hard for you. God, I know it's going to take some work and it's going to take some time. It's going to take some patience. But God, as long as I know that you are at work, I'm going to trust you. But God, you got to reveal it to me. Because here's what I know is true of you and me. We can't see the picture from inside the frame. As much as we want to, We cannot see the picture from what's inside the frame. We need God to point these things. God, not just point it out, but God, would you pull it out? God, would you extract it out? God, would you drive it out? God, would you crush it? Would you kill it? Anything that's not of you, God, I don't want it anymore. God, I want you. I want to live a new life in you. God, would you reveal that to me? See, I think this is what God is calling us to, if we're willing to just simply lean in and just assess. Just, God, do a work in my heart. You know what Jesus is getting at in this Martha and Mary story? Priorities. It's reassessing your priorities. Is God the priority in your life? Are you choosing to make room for God in your life? I'm going to give you 4 quick things to help you this week to make room for God in your life. And even if you just started with one, even if you just prayed that prayer, God, if there's anything limiting in me from your best for me, just reveal it to me. Even if you just started there and prayed that every day this week, I think it would be impactful to your life. But I'm going to give you 4 things that I think are important for anybody following Jesus, wanting to grow spiritually, that are going to be helpful in your life as we choose to make room. And the first is this: we have to prioritize the presence of Christ in my daily life. I just talked about that, right? I got to prioritize his presence in my daily life. I can't disconnect him from everything else in my life. Jesus is going to be a part of my life, or he's not. We have to be willing not to invite Jesus into our heart, but then keep Jesus out of everything else that's going on. We have to choose to say, Jesus, I want all of it. I want you to be involved in everything, God. God, I want you. I don't want production. I don't want just results. I want your presence. Your presence is everything to me. Your presence is better. Your presence is the better way. Paul says it this way. He says, I once thought all these things that I had, all this stuff, everything that's going on, I once thought my education, my background, my upbringing, you know what I'm saying? My family name, you know what I mean? The respect that I have in society, you know, for all the stuff that, my legacy, you know what I mean? Like, it's like, Paul says, it's crap. It's garbage. He says, I once thought all those things were valuable, but now I consider them worthless. Why? Because of what Christ has done for my life, because Christ changes everything. He says, yes, everything else is worthless when compared to the infinite value of knowing Christ Jesus as my Lord. If the things that I do and the things that I get accolades for and the things that people know me for take a higher priority than God in my life, Paul says there's a problem with that. I live that way, he said, but I realize that because of Jesus and in the change that he's made in my life, he says it's for his sake that I've made some room. I've discarded that way of thinking. I've discarded thinking that way about myself. I've discarded thinking that that's what I have to achieve so that people would love me. No, he says, I've discarded everything else, counting it all as garbage, right? Garbage, right? You might want to learn Greek, but I mean, he gets a little extreme right here. I talked about it once, and I just think, this is the significance that we should see how important Paul says this is. He says, it's all garbage so that I can gain Christ. He said, there's nothing more important than gaining Christ. There's nothing more important than having Christ the center of your life. There's nothing greater than having Jesus as the foundation that your life is built upon. Right? Prioritizing the presence of God in my life. And then this, proactively getting rid of every distraction. I got to proactively get rid of every distraction. You know what they are. You know what those distractions might be. You know them better than I do, right? You know if it's TV. You know if it's the computer. You know if it's your phone. You know if it's all three. You know whatever that is. You know those things that constantly distract you. What if you said, God, I want to be proactive in this. God, I got to do something different. I get caught up in these distractions. I look and then 3 hours later have gone by. I don't get those 3 hours back. God, I want to be proactive. I want to see it before it comes. These distractions, God, would you reveal those things to me, God, so we can get rid of those things. It's not that I can't participate. It's not that social media is bad. It's not that I can't watch TV. It's that, you know what, if those things become greater than what you want to do in me, then guess what? It's only hindering me from your best for me. I want to make room. So I want to get rid of each and every distraction. Hebrews 12:1 says this, therefore, since we are surrounded by such a great cloud of witnesses, let us do what? Let us be proactive. Let's throw off everything that hinders. Let's throw off all those distractions. Let's get rid of those things out of our life. Let's do what we have to. Let's put the boundaries in place that we need to put in place. So those things that hinder and the sin that so easily entangles us. And if we can do that, then guess what happens? When we get unhindered, when we become untangled from those distractions, he says, then you know what? Hebrews says, let us run with perseverance. Let us run with perseverance the race that's marked out for us. We can only run with perseverance. We can only run in faith. We can only stay true to what God is calling us to if we're willing to say, God, remove the distractions. God, remove those things that so easily, it's so easy that it entangles me. What about this? Participate in the environments and practices that open up my heart for God to do what I can't do. Participate in the environments and practices that open up my heart for God to do what I can't do. We need God to be able to do in our heart what we know that we can't do on our own. To do that, it's the environments and practices that matter. I love this. I can tell you about my goals and my dreams to one day win a strongman contest. And if you see me right now, most of you are like, good luck. I can keep talking about this winning this strongman contest, and one day I'm going to win this strongman contest. But I know that that's never, ever going to become a reality unless I put myself in the environments and begin some of the practices that will open me up to that actually happening. If we say that 2019 is going to be my best year personally because it's going to be my best year spiritually, the only way that we're going to grow spiritually is to place ourselves in the environments and choose to practice the things that are going to help me do just that. That invites God into my life to make the changes that only He can make that I cannot do. I got to be able to do that. Today, community group launch. Groups are launching. What's hindering us from getting in a group? I know you got a million excuses, but could that be an obstruction of your attitude? Could that be a hindrance of hurry in your life? Is there something that's keeping you from that? Does God need to drive that? Do you need to make room and get into groups with other people so we can grow together, hold each other accountable? Saying, no, I'm not going to let the enemy attack you like that. I'm going to pray for you because 2019, God's got something better for us. God's going to do it in us. And I'm going to be with you. I'm going to walk with you. I'm going to track with you. I'm going to hold us accountable to being in the environments and practices that open up our life to God to work. And the last one is Colossians 2:7 says, let your roots grow down in Him and let your lives be built. Grow strong in the truth you were taught and you will overflow with thankfulness. It's about being rooted. Let your roots grow down deep. And the last one is this, look, pause and pay attention. We got to pause and pay attention. When's the last time you slowed down long enough just to pay attention? I don't know that God speaks to me. I've never heard God's voice. I don't know that God speaks to me like He speaks to other people. When's the last time you slowed down long enough to listen? Because here's what I know about God. He's not trying to make hearing Him difficult. God desires a relationship with you, and part of a relationship with you is communication. And communication is not just one way. As we communicate to God, God wants to communicate to us. We have to be willing to pause long enough, to slow down long enough, and to sit and listen. Mary sat at the feet of the Lord and was willing to listen. Oh man, what would that look like if we were able to do that in our lives? To simply pay attention, to give God attention, to simply be still and know that He's God. To be still and know that He is God. What am I getting at today? Look, making room is about granting God the space to work and creating the room to respond. Making room is about granting God the space to work in our life, and not just granting Him the space to work, but it requires us clearing the room to respond. That we choose to respond. Today, in this moment, I want us to respond. These guys, I asked them to come out here because we're going to worship together. In fact, I want you to stand to your feet right now. As you're wrapping up those notes right there with this statement, making room is about granting God the space to work and creating room to respond. We're going to sing a brand new song to you today. And maybe you might not know the words. You can follow along on the screens if you like. But here's what I'm asking you to do. Will you allow these guys to minister to you right now, to sing over you? Will you invite God to clear the space and to create the room inside of you this year?
Praise God. Let's just worship Him. And so making room requires a conscious, intentional decision on our part to identify the things that are hindering us, that are maybe taking the place of God in our lives. And so let's just do that as we worship, as we surrender these things to Him. Let's make room. I find space for what I treasure. I make time for what Jesus, you're my number one. So I will make room for you. I will prepare for two, so you don't feel that you can't live here. Please live in me. Oh yeah. I find space for what I treasure. I make time